Jesus Christ.
A blessed evening to everyone, and also to those who are joining us through this live streaming in other parts of the world. As I was listening and meditating on the first reading today, you recognize, one recognizes the humanness of the church. In many parts of the great part of the letters of Paul, or to these different communities, are particular issues, difficulties that have arisen within the community. And today, in the first reading, we find a very crucial issue, and that is the legitimacy of Paul as an apostle. He was being questioned. To understand today's first reading, we have to put ourselves in the shoes of the Apostle Paul, who from the beginning had accompanied the Corinthian community. He seemed to be one, if not the founder of the Christian community there, or at least organized this community. But shortly after, some people have appeared who wanted to discredit him as an apostle, as sent by the Lord. Yes, it is true, and he recognized that previously in Jerusalem, he persecuted the Christians, and many sent them to jail. And these who discredited Paul, he called them super apostles, who wanted to destroy what Paul, with so much love and sacrifice, had been sowing in that community of Corinth. Here we have a very real issue that can destroy faith and life of Christians and communities. I'm sure you must have experienced, many of us have experienced this disharmony in the community because of envy among those who want to serve and guide the church, the Christian community. In my 28 years as a priest, this is a real issue, I would say. And Paul, on the other hand, seems to say to his rivals that an esteemed apostle makes himself paid for his services, as did those who served, for example, the temple of Jerusalem. They were supported, they were paid. On the other hand, Paul is a poor man who does not take advantage of his listeners or his authority. And when Paul makes this as an appeal to justify his legitimacy as an apostle, he lists down paradoxically, not his achievements like founding communities or the trips he made or conversions or the baptisms of which he could boast. No. Rather, he remembered his long journey, missionary journey, and traveled in the shadow of the cross of Christ, meaning he boasted on the sufferings he endured, the deprivations, the fatigue, the persecution and punishment, dangers of death. He was trying to say, well, it's easy for you, and maybe it is to show that you are super apostles, that because you are well paid. But I, doing this missionary work without gaining for myself. Now, that was his argument of showing the legitimacy of his mission. So only in the cross of Christ that every apostle carries and confirms his legitimacy and the power of his word. This is the fundamental lesson that Paul wants to teach us here. He ends up putting God as a witness that everything he said is true, and that if he has to boast about anything, it is his weaknesses. Meaning, in spite of his weaknesses, God has called him to be a messenger, an instrument. And what he could achieve were not because of him, but because of the grace of God. A beautiful reminder for all of us who are into the church, called to participate in the mission, that may we come always like Paul, to glory only, to can boast only in the grace of God, more than our own achievements. In today's gospel, Matthew reminds us of the words of Jesus to his disciples. Do not accumulate treasures on earth, he said, where moths and woodworm eat them, where thieves open holes and steal them. Treasure or make treasures in heaven, because where your treasure is, there your heart is. Someone said this memorable phrase, the tree does not eat its fruits. It is a way of saying that all beings, including humans, exist to give ourselves, not to enclose ourselves. And St. Paul, in the Acts of the Apostles, recalled these words: there is more happiness in giving than in receiving. A proverb of Jesus seems that Paul learned from other Christians, because we do not find this in the Gospels, the narratives of the Gospels, but here in the Acts of the Apostles. And it is that human beings that have been made to give and to give ourselves. Our life would change if we could understand that, I think. Like the tree, we are not made to eat our own fruits, but to give them as sustenance for others. Just as fruits rot if they are not picked up, in the same way our gifts turn out to be infertile if we do not put them at the service of others. The ability to share is not tied up with abundance of resources, but to the generosity of the heart. The generous person, even when going through periods of scarcity, finds within himself or herself the source of joy, just as Jesus revealed. There is more joy in giving than in receiving. Coming down here for Mass, I met two ladies carrying a gift. And I was asking them, what is that for? Para sa kanino yan? Wala po in particular. It is for you, fathers. Sabi niya. No. Recognizing, Father's Day nasa Sunday, Father, sabi niya. The joy that we can see in people being able to share even in their scarcity and in the midst of deprivation. The root, I think, of sadness and loneliness that many people live is their inability to give, to share, not only things, but of themselves, of their time. We ask the Lord that gifted, truly gifted by the Lord, we may be able to share generously to others. And may we find treasures in this, in giving, just as the challenge of Jesus today, that we accumulate treasures not here on earth, but in heaven. And one way of accumulating is precisely in giving.